Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne. Welcome to Mama Paul's video podcast. Today is Friday, January the 18th, 2022. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to go back a week to the editorial on the op-ed, actually, the op-ed in the New York Times from last Saturday, the 8th. And, well, let me put it up on the board here and I'll show you what it said. I'll put it on the big board here first. We'll see if that comes up. Okay, there it is. And the headline on the page was, the whole page here was, what voters really think about the state of America. What voters really think about the state of America. And you can see they've got a split screen here with the Capitol, with a split in between it. And on the left side, we have one of the officers from the Capitol with a baton protecting the Capitol. And we have the people on the right-hand side climbing up the walls of the Capitol, ready to break into the place and continue the insurrection that was taking place that day. So what they did was they put together two panels. They put together a panel of Republicans and Democrats. So this is the New York Times last Saturday, and they get together a group of Republicans and a group of Democrats, and they're going to ask them the same questions, basically about what they thought about 2020, the year before 2021, and specifically about the January 6th insurrection. Let me say at the beginning of this, I bring this up pretty frequently. I wouldn't exactly say the New York Times was a bastion of progressive anything. I wouldn't exactly say they were left-leaning. If anything, they're very centrist. And that's the way I see the New York Times. I see the New York Times as very centrist establishment. Mother Jones is a little bit to the left. Amy Goodman is to the left. Tom Hartman is a little bit to the left. Fox News is way to the right. National Review is a rational Republican magazine. So I will go to the National Review frequently for information. The Wall Street Journal is rational Republican, generally speaking. The far right attempts to make out the New York Times and MSNBC as if they're, these radical left-wing socialist, communist, disrupting the whole society. It's anything but the truth. It's absolutely anything but the truth. And what's happened is over the years, the one side's always accusing the other side of what they do. And Trump classically stopped the steal. Well, what does Trump do? He steals. Well, all right, let me get back to this. So anyway, we've got the Republicans and the Democrats, and they ask both of them, they open up with the question. The question is, what is the they ask all these people here, what are the six biggest things that happened in 2021? What's the six biggest things that you think happened in 2021? Well, they asked the Democratic group, and 6 out of 9 of the Democratic group said the insurrection on January 6th was the biggest event of the year. 6 out of 9. On the Republican side, the answers were, the first answer from this group was the vaccine, the economy going bad, the price of gas going up, Betty White dying, the social justice movement growing. And I'm not sure whether they were in favor of that or that was a critique or not. And then they were talking, the next one was the Great Divide in America, and specifically over the vaccines again. And the vaccines get mentioned in here, that you had to show your card, and the fact that you might have to show your card meant that your civil rights were being taken away from you. So this was their response. Out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the top 6 people they had didn't even mention the insurrection. And the Democrats, that's the top of their plate over here. They then went on to ask people what they thought of what happened on January 6th, the insurrection date. Now, this is the paper of January the 8th, so this is 2 days after the insurrection, and we've had all the news about the insurrection going on and a follow-up to last year's events. So 2 days after that. Anyway, so they asked them what they thought of January 6th. Well, on the Democratic side, we've got the end of democracy, shocking, disturbing, lawlessness, devastating, infantile behavior. On the right-hand side, the Republicans' response, overblown. Some people said it was scary. Somebody complained about how they went so far as to search the home of one of the individuals who was being arrested for participating in the insurrection. Now, how shocking! They went and they actually went into his house and looked for evidence that he probably had God knows what he had in the house. Somebody else said when they asked to respond to how do you feel about January 6th? Trump, MAGA, and CNN. Trump, MAGA, and CNN. I didn't get the connection between how CNN fits in with MAGA and with Trump, other than the fact that well, anyway, let that go. And the last one that's worth mentioning was blown out of proportion. Blown out of proportion. So the people on the left are looking at this going, people on the left, the Democrats are looking at this as, democracy is in bad shape here. This is a terrible thing that happened. And the right wing is sitting over here saying, oh, it's overblown, scary, So they're listening to some of these people that are talking about how, a group of tourists were visiting the White House, the Capitol that day, and they happened to get caught up in a riot. So let me dig into this a little bit, and I'm going to read some of the direct responses over here. And one of the things that was most shocking to me was on the Democratic side here, we'd say we got responses like an inevitable boiling point of a flawed system that has only gotten worse. A flawed system. The system which keeps us in a harsh place unless you're the top of the top. The system is keeping us in a harsh place. And they went on to mention how the immigrants are made out to be stealing the jobs of Americans over here. People are fed up with politics, telling lies, and this and that, and they were frustrated. And well, the system. They, meaning the Republicans, didn't want Biden. They don't want immigrants. They want America to be America, but they don't know that America is a country of immigrants, which is pretty much true. And going down here, it's the United States is in a critical condition. I'd be scared to go out and vote. This one person said, I'd be scared to go out and vote. This was, Susan says, 20 or 30 years or so ago, things started to exponentially get worse. 20, 30 years ago. I couldn't agree with her more. And when you track this thing back, you really got to go back to around 1986, in the middle of the Reagan years, when the flight controllers went on strike, and Reagan busted the unions, and that was the end of union organizing in America, and it's been downhill ever since then. And ever since then, there's been a whole flip in the whole country here. Somebody else goes on to mention the lobbyists are in control, and lobbyist interests. Couldn't agree more. And Tracy said it's the system, it's the agenda that's been set up and has been set forward. The system. And at the end, we get another mention of the system here, because the corrupt system that already existed, it was a response to a real problem, even if they couldn't identify the source. Well, what really strikes me is the system is mentioned half a dozen times at the very least. And my view of the system is that it's capitalist democracy that's the system. And it's the capitalism that has subsumed the democracy. It's capitalism which is the system. But it's very, very difficult to attack capitalism in this country. It sort of stands head and shoulders above everything else. Everything else has been so discredited over the years that capitalism, the small restaurant owner downtown, the small retail store downtown, the small businessman downtown, thinks he's part of the capitalist system, and that's the real falsehood that's been perpetrated on the whole country here. So people say that the system is a problem. Well, the system is the capitalism, and that literally is the root of the whole problem here, from my perspective, which is why I call it capitalist democracy and not democratic capitalism. I talked about this on one of my later shows in December. I used to always refer to this as democratic capitalism. That's what seems to flow. Well, the capitalism is not democratic. In fact, if anything, and I found this out early on when I started working at AT&T, that the capitalism is anything but democratic. In fact, its roots are, in fact, it's very fascist. It's top down. It's pretty much fascist, which is why in a democratic socialism is basically fascism, and then they use the word socialism in there. Democratic Socialist Party in Germany. Okay, let's go over here to the other side, the Republican side over here, and when I say January 6th, like I said, these people are talking about overblown, misrepresented, blown out of proportion. How many of you believe Joe Biden won the election fair and square? And the responses are basically that, no, they believe Trump really won the election. So most of these people on this side believe that Trump really won the election. Then some other people went on to say that we feel like Trump should have won. And they're talking about how that Biden didn't win fair and square, and what's driving the divide between the Republicans and the Democrats is the fact that Biden's in the White House now. And then they're complaining that Trump had to do with his personality that people hated so much. His personality. Okay, he was a bombastic egotist, but he was also a lying, cheating, stealing gangster. The guy has gangster roots. His whole family roots go back. And we may do a show on this. David K. Johnson has a whole book out, and he's been following Trump for probably one of the biggest journalists who's been following Trump is David K. Johnson. And when he gets into Trump and the Trump family, it goes back to the great-grandfather and his original whorehouse that he had going in the western states, continues to the grandfather and then the father. And the father had direct ties with the Gambino family in Queens, and that's who taught Fred Trump how to keep black people out of the projects that he had, and how to basically steal from the city. He had these various projects, and say a refrigerator broke. So he was getting government money and subsidies all over the place, always getting government subsidies all over the place. So they would claim that they were taking out, that the refrigerator breaks, so they would claim that they had a $5,000 bill for the refrigerator, when in fact they had like a $500 bill for the refrigerator. 2 sets of books. So they would say one thing to one group and one thing to the other group. Just like these lawsuits that are right now in the courts in New York are claiming that Trump has done. The father did it. He learned this from the mob, from the Gambino family originally, and they've been hanging out with gangsters ever since. Roy Cohen, who was the guy that put the America's sleaziest lawyer in American history. That's the guy that put the Rosenbergs in the electric chair. Was Richard Nixon's main lawyer. That's the guy who taught Nixon how to. Well, I'll give you the wide shot. There's the wide shot, right? How to put Nixon, how to throw his hands up. So he's the one that taught Nixon how to make that victory sign like this, you know. That was, which Roger Stone does to this day. Let's get rid of the side there, and we'll go back to the front, the smaller shot. And I'll take this off for the time being. Okay, continuing on here. This guy winds up saying, one of the Republicans winds up saying, shake it off. Things happen in life. Quit being a wuss. Quit being a wuss. Tremendous amount of hands that have to do with freedoms being taken away because of the mandates. Because of the mandates for the vaccine. And they even go so far as, and this is a common thread you hear throughout a lot of Republicans, the government looks for events like COVID-19 as a way to usher in the new world order and just have everything be more socialistic. The new world order and socialism, and it's got to do with COVID. So COVID is ushering in the new world. Well, I got off on a real tangent with this the other day, and which is why I'm redoing the show. This is a redo. And I originally attributed some of this thinking to a Polish American who was Jimmy Carter's foreign policy advisor and George Bush's policy advisor, a major policy advisor, somewhat responsible for a few of the atrocities that took place over the course of the 80s and into the 90s. And I mistakenly had him mixed up with the New World Order. It's not the rap that he was involved in. And the guy's name I'm talking about is Brzezinski, B-R-Z-E-Z-I-N-S-K-I, Brzezinski, Zbigniew Brzezinski. And he wrote a book called Out of Control, Global Turmoil on the Eve of the 21st Century. So I looked up the whole New World Order, and boy, you want to see conspiracy theories, holy Kaczynski. We got the Illuminati and the Freemasons and the Pope and the New Age gurus, and everybody and their brother is involved with this New World Order conspiracy. Wikipedia it. You'll keep yourself busy for about an hour or two. And by the time you finish reading the whole thing, you're not too sure exactly what they're talking about or who they're talking about or who it is that's doing what to whom. But these guys have got it down that COVID-19 is bringing in a New World Order, which is going to make everything more socialistic. You know, like democratic socialism, like they have in Europe, where you have where everybody has health insurance. Well, what a problem that would be. They push COVID, and another person goes on to say they push COVID because they're trying to keep the mail-in ballots. So this person is basically claiming that the mail-in ballots are a threat to democracy, and by pushing COVID, which, you know, I'm sure Biden got up this morning and said, "Wow, let me use COVID as a wedge to keep mail-in balloting going." I mean, some of the thinking here, these people, is just absolutely insane. They're talking about how somebody actually said the Democrats invaded the White House. The Democrats invaded the White House. Joshua complained about the media didn't have the facts, and they changed everything as they went on. Now, the facts were that you were watching this January 6th insurrection on television. You were watching it live. It wasn't a lot of editorializing going on. You had the camera on these people attacking the building, breaking windows, beating up people, hitting people with all sorts of devices, pepper spraying people, right and left. We watch this, and this guy's pretty much trying to say that they were manipulating the facts along the way. And I'm going to end it up by saying it started off to be the people expressing their opinion in a peaceful way. It got a little out of hand and turned into a little bit of a mob mentality, and just got out of control in a way that normally wouldn't happen. Goes on to say, the next person goes on to say, it's not going to be a big event in history. People stood up for what they thought. People stood up for what they thought. So for months, Trump was inciting people to come to Washington, literally inciting them to come, talking about the stolen election. The only thing stolen is Trump projecting his basic behaviors of stealing from anybody that's around him. So the guy projects continuously. He's a narcissist. He's in bed with a bunch of with all the autocrats around the planet. And this is what you hear on Fox News night after night after night. There's a symbiotic relationship between Fox News and this whole neo-fascist mentality that we have out there. It started off with a little people expressing their opinion. They had an opinion that it was stolen. We have how many judges have said that no, the election wasn't stolen. Republicans said that it wasn't stolen. One after another said no, it wasn't stolen. The only people that said it was stolen is Trump and a bunch of his goons. So it got an opinion in a peaceful way and got a little bit out of hand. Peaceful way. Some of these guys showed up with armor. They showed up with guns. They showed up with pepper spray. They were ready for a fight. There were actually contingencies of people outside of Washington that were going to be called by these some of these right-wing militia groups after they took control and hung Mike Pence on a gallows. I mean, how absurd can this thing get? So anyway, that was the paper. This was a week ago. What voters really think about the state of America. I'm going to follow it up real quickly with America's Falling Apart at the Seams, which is today's Friday the 14th. David Brooks, America is Falling Apart at the Seams. Now, David Brooks used to be I call him a rational Republican. He's always been sort of a rational Republican. And here he's talking about the state of America and how things are, bad behavior of all kinds is going on. He started off the essay by noticing that although during the pandemic there was a decrease in road traffic, there was an increase in fatalities. And there was an increase in fatalities because people were ignoring the rules, drinking, not putting on seatbelts. So the general disregard for rules going on. So not only was reckless driving on the rise, but drug overdose has been on the rise. And what really got everybody's attention was the opioid pandemic, which has been going on for over 20 years now, was mostly a white overdose pandemic. Well, it's seeping into the black community now also. And hate crimes are the highest they've been in over a dozen years. Gun purchases are higher than they've ever been. Kids in school are fighting more and disrupting things more. And he says American hostility towards one another seems to be growing. Their care for one another seems to be falling. So people are more and more opposed to each other and fighting with each other, and many of us are behaving badly in various ways, but why? So he keeps asking the question why throughout the editorial. He goes on here, that's not even to mention the parts of the deteriorating climate that are hard to quantify. The rise in polarization, hatred, anger, and fear. And he talks about how when he started going to college, you could talk, you could bring up issues, and you could have a decent conversation about various things. Nowadays, you come out with something that somebody disagrees with, and suddenly you get socially ostracized from the whole place. It's just everything is sort of out of control. And now, David Brooks, basically at the end of this thing, he says, as a columnist, I'm supposed to have some answers, but I don't have them now. I just know that the situation is dire, and I don't know what the answer is. On the next page, this was even worse. We need to think the unthinkable about the United States. We need to think the unthinkable. The subheading here is worst case scenario, the country as we know it could disintegrate. And they're talking here, in the middle of this, he's talking about the general disintegration of the democracy that's happening. And he quotes from there was a bipartisan, I remember this a couple of years ago, there was a bipartisan transition integrity project. And this was started at the beginning of the summer of 2020, before the election. And they got together these 100 former governors, officials, academics, research analysts, journalists, some people from the right, some people from the left, not favored in either direction. And these people were putting together possibilities of what could happen during the election. And pretty much predictably, the far-right groups mobilized to dismiss the project and called them a bunch of leftist psychological warfare, branded it as a blueprint for a left-wing coup, because these guys were predicting that there was going to be possibility of violence. The right-wing minority is now practicing a form of brinkmanship by threatening to unilaterally destroy American democracy, daring what it hopes is a timid and somnolent majority to resist. But the majority has the benefit of warning ahead of 2024. So the far right groups are accusing this middle of the road, completely bipartisan group of being of being, far leftist, trying to have a coup, which is what these guys are trying to do. So the obvious thing going on here is that people see this dismantling of the democratic process happening here in America. Interestingly, I started to talk earlier about Brzezinski, and so I wound up looking him up, and the book that he wrote, Out of Control, Global Turmoil on the Eve of the 21st Century, you got to hear this. Now, this is written back in the early 90s. We are living in a time of fragmentation, increasing disunity in Europe, dangerous eruptions in the Islamic Republic, growing disparity between the world's rich and the world's poor, direct result of capitalism, and the evils of the, quote, permissive cornucopia in America, which through overstimulation of material desires and sensual gratification is leading to the collapse of Western moral and spiritual values. In short, we are living in a philosophical climate that is out of control. Now, a few people watching the show are not fans of this guy Brzezinski at all, and they're going to quote a lot of his establishment procedures that led to a lot of people getting killed in third world encounters during the 80s in South America and in Asia. But here this guy is, and he's analyzing what's going on in the world, and he's saying we've got a collapse due to the overstimulation of material desire and sensual self-gratification, leading to the collapse of Western moral and spiritual values. It's capitalism out of control. Capitalism out of control. So obvious it defies rational thinking. Now, maybe there's an answer to some of this stuff. So the positive side here today is it's coming into the newspapers on a regular basis. It's there every other day, what's happening. And now, Timothy Snyder wrote a book called On Tyranny a little bit ago, which is sort of very didactic little, and he lists 20 lessons from the 20th century. Well, they redid the book with graphic artists. I'm planning on doing a show every week on one of the chapters in this book. And this book, I would highly recommend you run out right now. I wouldn't order anything through Amazon. I would get it at my local bookstore. I would not support Amazon. This book really digs deeply into the types of things that went on all during the 20th century that led to the fascism and communism and the autocratic rulers in Europe. I'm not going to say anything more about it today other than the fact that here it is. I'm going to talk about it quite a bit. It's a brilliant book, lavishly illustrated with an amazing amount of really interesting historical references in it. And we're going to end up with a little quote from Amanda Gorman. That's the gal that wrote that poem that she read when Biden was sworn in as president, the inauguration. And on the cover here we got, this book is a message in a bottle. This book is a letter. This book does not let up. The first poem she's got in here is called Ship's Manifest. I'm not going to read the whole poem. I'm just going to read a couple of lines of it. Allegedly, the worst is behind us. Still, we crouch before the lip of tomorrow, halting like a headless haunt in our own house, waiting to remember exactly what it is we're supposed to be doing. And what exactly are we supposed to be doing? Allegedly, the worst is behind us. Still, we could crouch before the lip of tomorrow, halting like a headless haunt in our own house, waiting to remember exactly what it is that we're supposed to be doing and exactly what are we supposed to be doing. I don't think anything expresses exactly the frustration going on for myself and for, I'm sure, quite a few people out there. We thought the worst was behind us with January 6th. It's not. It continues to continue. And things may be getting worse, and we're running around like a chicken with our head cut off in the middle here and go, what do we do? What do we do? And what exactly are we supposed to be doing? And that's why I'm going to go back to this book, because we're going to find some answers in here. We're going to look at this book deeply. We're going to find some answers in here, and hopefully we'll continue this discussion as we go along for the next few weeks. Take care, peace, patience, persistence, and I'll see you as soon as I can.